Okay, before I start demoing the CaBezel molds, let's just talk about them really briefly. They are made out of a translucent photopolymer, and that works to our advantage because we can see through them, and you'll see why that's important later on. We have several different designs. This one is called Lemon Egg. This one is called Paramount. The size of these are wonderful if you want to make a statement. This is called Organics. This one is Minis. This one actually has all the different shapes to go with not only the organics, but also with the geometric mold that I'm going to be demonstrating today. So the smaller version can either be worked in with them, or it can be used to make smaller scale jewelry, earrings especially. I'm going to assume, for the sake of this demonstration, that you already have some knowledge of polymer clay and you know all about the importance of conditioning your clay and baking it on the right temperature for the correct amount of time. So for those of you that aren't familiar at all with the CaBezel molds, the reason they are called that is because one side of the mold creates the cabochon and the other side of the mold creates the bezel. So if you put those two words together, cabochon and bezel, if you shorten them, you get the word CaBezel. In order to use the CaBezel molds, you need very few items. So if you work with polymer clay, you know that you need a work surface, and a lot of us work on ceramic tiles. That way they can be popped into the oven. You'll need some clay that's conditioned. I have two pieces here. One is rolled on the thickest setting of my pasta machine. The other is rolled on a medium thick setting. And you'll get a feel for it. It's not very strict. You just have to make sure that your clay is thick enough for the bezel part that when you use the mold, it doesn't go right through the clay to your work surface. You're going to need a scalpel and perhaps a flexible tissue blade as well. You're definitely going to need an acrylic roller or something very similar to that. And you may want to use some cookie cutters if you're not so steady with your hand, or you're not so confident in free-handing a shape with a blade. And that's all we need to get started. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, let's get started making a bezel with the CaBezel mold. So I have conditioned and sheeted my polymer clay with a pasta machine. You don't need to get all worried about the thicknesses or how many cards high. You will get a feel for how thick you need the clay to be after, you have a few practice goes at this. What we're trying to do here is just to have clay thick enough so that when we use the mold and we put a lot of pressure on it, that the clay isn't going to be so thin that it tears easily. When we're doing the cabochons, we'll want to use even thicker clay because that will determine the thickness of our cabochon. So I am going to put these two sheets of clay together, trying to make sure that I'm not trapping any air bubbles. Now I think I forgot in the intro there that it's nice to work on paper. In fact, you should work on paper. So I am going to mist this with a little bit of water. Let's do the square bezel. So there's just a tiny bit of water. You don't need much. Like I said in the intro, if you're using Fimo clay, then water is not going to be your friend. You need a different release, perhaps Armor All. So I've just put that on the clay. I'm going to take this acrylic roller and I am going to start in the center and work my way out to the edges, applying quite a bit of pressure. You'll notice that you can already tell the clay is up into the mold because it's changed color. It's now all black, the same color as the clay. I need to do a little bit of work here, as you can see. I always like to rotate the clay because I find I'm a little bit heavy-handed on the right side. So I just want to make sure that I've gone evenly all the way across the mold. And that's all it takes, really. If you're working with Kato clay, you'll find that it is a really, really stiff clay, and it may take you a little bit longer. So now, all we're going to do is lift off the CaBezel. And I hope you can see that nice impression there. If you find that, you know, you've sort of squished this side because, you know, like me, you're a little bit heavy-handed on the one side, it's very easy to place this back on top. You don't even have to do it visually. You can just sort of do it by feel. I can tell that that is stuck over top of the mold, the clay. So just go over it one more time and try to correct the mistake you made. I would suggest turning it again. And there you have it. Now you have a few choices. You can use a cookie cutter if you're not comfortable doing this freehand, but since this is a square, we get to use a tissue blade, and that makes it really easy. It's easier than a circle. So I'm going to cut right on the edge. Make sure your blade is going straight up and down. And don't lift up the CaBezel or the bezel off of the paper. Lift the scrap clay and put it aside. And there you have it, your first bezel. Just going to make sure you can see that. Now, how easy is that? So what you're going to do now, if you choose to leave it plain, it goes in the oven now. Leave it stuck to the paper, put it in the oven, and bake it. Follow your clay manufacturer's instructions. However, if you don't want to leave it plain, and I often use scrap clay for my bezels, it's a great way to get rid of scrap clay. If you want to, you could dust this with the Pearl X powder and change the color before you bake it. Or if you don't want to manhandle this while it's soft and pliable, you can wait until it's baked and then you can apply gilder's paste, iced enamels. Possibilities are endless. You're going to want to use a sharp blade to cut this. And actually, you don't even have to cut close to the edge. If you choose, you may have a round cookie cutter that fits exactly. This is the nice blue set from Atico, and that is an exact fit. So I could use that to cut it out. You can also use a larger sized cutter. Make sure you have it centered, and you can use that to cut it out. Oops. I'll show you what that looks like actually. Give it a twist. And then what I'm going to do is cut this away. Remove the scrap. Of course, that will come off if I take it off the paper. So you can use cookie cutter, but I'm still going to show you how to freehand it. So what I do is I put a little mark where I start. Make sure your blade is extremely sharp. And instead of moving your hand, you are going to move the paper. And that just makes it so much easier. I'm having a little bit of an issue here with some glare because I have so many lights set up that I think I may not be quite on the edge, but that's okay. You get the idea. Okay, let's put a little slit over here so we can remove that more easily. And there you have it. You're going to leave that on the paper and bake it. Now, if you find that you have a little nick because you stopped somewhere and caused a mark, well, you can choose to just use your finger and gently smooth it now, or you can put it in your oven and bake it, and once it's cooled, you can have some fine sandpaper standing by and you can just rub the edges on the sandpaper. Okay, now it's time to make the cabochons that match the bezels. Again, we're working with 2 layers of clay. They're both on the thickest setting of the pasta machine. You can even add another layer here, either on the thickest or, you know, whatever you choose. So let's just put that on and hope for no air bubbles. Now I have to be careful I don't go over to that edge because there's no clay underneath it. I'm just going to give it a light roll. Okay, now here's where the advantage of the translucent molds comes in. Let's say we're going to make the round cabochon to match the round bezel. This is a silkscreen pattern that I put onto white clay, and I used blue paint for this. So this is a gorgeous pattern. It's one of Create Along stencils. And because we can see through it, we can choose, you know, what to showcase in the center of the cabochon. We could do something like that. We could even move over here. Just make sure you can see that. And we could get that. That's a great area. I think I like that even better than that. Okay, let's get going. So again, a quick spritz of water. I think I'll do the square one first. Now there's no clay underneath that, so I have to be careful. Let's see. Let's do that. I'm going to turn it. And I'll just turn it one more time. Again, don't forget to work on paper. Okay, same as before. Now this is going to be a little bit difficult for you to see. I'm sure you can see the raised edges there. And again, we're going to cut it out in the same manner as we did with the bezels. Now, be careful if you want to use this for another project that you don't, you know, slice right into that and waste it. So I can see the edge of my square cabochon. That in, make sure it's all centered. And you'll see that there's a tiny bit of room around the edge, not too much. What I would do then is I would take my thumb and just lightly roll down the edge. Don't try to do it all in one go around. This just gives it more of a cab-like shape. Don't touch the center. You don't want to put any pressure on the center at all. You want it to stay the highest part of the cabochon. And you can go around 3 or 4 times, just doing a little bit each time until you have a beautiful shape. Now, if you're using a cane on top, you're going to want to match the bottom layer of clay with your cane, and that way you won't see that, the contrast, unless that's what you're after. But then what I would do is I'd leave the cabochon in the bezel. I would bake it for the required amount of time. And since I didn't use any liquid polymer clay or anything like that, when they're cool, I'm just going to give it a little bit of a bend and pop the cabochon off. That way I can choose to work on this if I want to. Sometimes I'll be putting eye pins, adding another layer of clay and rebaking it. And that way you just have a nice flat surface to work on and you're not having a cabochon that rocks. Anyway, I hope you got a few tips from this today. I know it was very basic. We will come back and make some other videos and show you how to make some jewelry with the CaBezel molds.